It was 10 years ago that our incorporation was registered to enable us to work in all the jails throughout the Philippines. And yesterday was my first visit to one of our jails on mission work here in the UK. It was HMP Lewes. I was invited by one of the prison chaplains to tell my story as told in my recent publication, Converted on LSD Trip, or alternatively, From Crime to Christ. A book that tells the story of my brother Michael and I, who were both notorious criminals among our peers in Aylesbury during the later part of the 60s. We were sentenced to prison for malicious wounding and carrying a firearm without a licence. I was sentenced to Borstal training due to my previous convictions for garage breaking and theft, and Michael to 2 years in Maidstone Prison due to his previous convictions. Michael had already done time in Oxford detention centres on 2 occasions, and then Rochester Borstal. We started our time the first month at HMP Canterbury Prison, and then I went on to Wormwood Scrubs and then Dover Borstal. Michael onto Maidstone Prison, where I believe one of the Crays was detained. There were quite a number of inmates that came for various reasons, and it was a good turnout. I felt warmly received and was free to tell of my former life of crime. I relived some of those times as I told my story to these prisoners at the time in prison and wayward lifestyle, until my conversion from crime to Christ on the 60th of January 1970. I told of my brother's life, who was subsequently arrested and sentenced to a 16-year term in the Philippines in 1996, who died of tuberculosis in May 2005. I was able to say why I wrote my first book, Converted on LSD Trip, and gave the reasons for our proposed production of our punk rock opera called Borstal Boy by the asylum seekers that puts my story together as a punk rock musical to be performed live. And it is hoped that trailblazers based in Aylesbury's Young Persons Prison will take up our request to allow us to perform this musical live in HMP Aylesbury, the very town where Michael and I grew up in during the 60s. The inmates and staff and volunteers listened intensely and asked very good questions, very serious questions related to my story. One inmate responded, informing us of the help that he received whilst he was in Feltham Prison through a production of a drama, so indicating his support to our proposal of performing our punk rock opera in a prison. I believe the word of God was sown into some good ground that day. Now let others water and let God give the increase. David Clarke. P.S. I felt privileged to speak at that meeting and to be amongst these inmates and people. Why not write to the chaplaincy and get a first-hand report of the meeting?